The security cam footage flickers. 2:17 a.m. Rain lashes the lens. We see the pristine white Audi parked high above the silent, dark pool. A shadow, a man pauses near the retaining wall, then walks away. 2:19 a.m. The concrete groans, the car tilts, and vanishes into the blackness below. The heat was a physical weight, pressing down on the Sun Vista condo complex, making the air vibrate. The only relief was the shimmering blue rectangle of the community pool, and it was being used exactly as God intended. "Marco!" yelled 7-year-old Leo, his eyes squeezed shut. "Polo!" screamed a chorus of 6 other children, their voices sharp and joyous as they splashed in the shallow end. Sarah, Leo's mother, sat on a faded vinyl lounge chair, a paperback sweating in her hands. She was exhausted. The medical billing reports she'd been processing from her small apartment since 6 a.m. blurred in her mind. This 2-hour break was not a luxury, it was a necessity. It was the only thing keeping her sane, the only free entertainment she could offer her son. She watched him cannonball, a perfect anarchic explosion of water, and felt a genuine smile crack her tired face. The sliding glass door of the community room scraped open. The sound was so jarringly violent against the laughter that everyone flinched. Evelyn Hayes emerged. Evelyn was a silhouette of sterile disapproval. She was in her late 50s, wearing white linen pants that had never seen a stain and a severe black top. Her sunglasses were large enough to obscure any hint of humanity. She didn't just walk to the pool, she advanced on it. The children, sensing a predator, went quiet first. The splashing subsided. Even the air seemed to still. Leo, treading water, looked over at his mom, his joy instantly evaporating, replaced by confusion. Sarah sat up, her stomach tightening. She knew this woman. Evelyn was Unit 412, the penthouse overlooking this very pool. She was the shadow on the HOA board, the author of countless passive-aggressive notes in the community newsletter about appropriate footwear in the lobby and improper recycling. Evelyn stopped at the edge of the pool deck, just far enough away to avoid any potential splash. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her tone was a blade. "This is completely unacceptable." Sarah stood, instinctively moving between the woman and the children. "I'm sorry, is there a problem?" Evelyn aimed her sunglasses at Sarah. It felt like being targeted by a weapon. "Is there a problem? I am trying to conduct a business call in my own home, and it sounds like a public zoo has attached itself to my balcony. This is a residential community, not a water park." Sarah felt a flush of anger, but she bit it back. She was a renter. Evelyn was an owner. This was a battle she was weighted to lose. "They're just kids, Evelyn. It's a pool on a Saturday." "They aren't just kids," Evelyn countered, her voice dropping. "They are a public nuisance, this incessant screaming. It's too noisy." She said too noisy as if it were a legal transgression, a violation of civil code. "Marco," Leo whispered weakly from the water, trying to restart the game. "Don't you dare," Evelyn snapped, her head whipping toward the boy. Leo physically recoiled, sinking up to his chin in the water. That broke Sarah's forced composure. "Hey, do not talk to my son like that." "Then control him," Evelyn shot back. "If you and the other mothers here had any sense of discipline, I wouldn't have to be the one to enforce the community bylaws. Section 4, nuisance and noise. I suggest you read it." "They're laughing, Evelyn. They're playing. It's 2 p.m. on a Saturday, not 2 a.m., Sarah argued, her voice rising despite herself. The other 2 mothers on the deck looked down, suddenly fascinated by the cracks in the concrete. "The time is irrelevant. The volume is the issue. My home, which I paid 7 figures for, is being invaded by this chaos." She gestured to the pool, to the children, as if they were an infestation. "Where are they supposed to play? In the parking lot? In my 800-square-foot apartment?" Sarah felt the injustice of it, the sheer, crushing unfairness. "This pool is the only amenity we have." "That," Evelyn said, "is not my concern. My concern is my peace, my property value, and frankly the class of residents this kind of behavior attracts." The insult landed sharp and deep. She was talking about Sarah, about renters, about families. Evelyn pulled out her phone, a pristine new iPhone. She held it up and began recording. The red light was a cyclops' eye. She panned across the children, who were now huddled by the steps, shivering. She panned to the other mothers, who shielded their faces. Then she centered it in a tight, humiliating close-up on Sarah. "This is Sarah," Evelyn narrated, her voice cold and steady for the recording. "Unit 204. She is the one who refuses to supervise the children. She is the one who is allowing this blatant violation of our community rules to continue. This is my evidence for the board, for Mark. Mark Johnson, the HOA president, Evelyn's closest friend and rumor had it, her lapdog. "Evelyn, stop it, You can't record my child," Sarah said, stepping toward her, her hands shaking with a mixture of rage and fear. "I can and I am. This is a common area and you are all in violation." Evelyn smiled, a thin, triumphant slash. "Consider this your final warning. The families in this complex seem to think the rules don't apply to them. They're about to find out just how wrong they are." She clicked the phone off, tucked it into her linen pants, and turned. Her back was rigid. She glided back to the community room, the glass door sliding shut behind her with a definitive thud. The pool area was silent. The only sound was the hum of the filter. The joy of the day had been surgically removed. Leo swam slowly to the edge, his small face pale. "Mommy, are we in trouble?" Sarah looked at her son, at the other kids, at the locked-in-place fear of the other adults. She felt a profound sense of failure, of helplessness. "No, baby, we're not in trouble." But she was lying. That evening an email landed in her inbox. It was from Mark Johnson, CCing the entire HOA board and Evelyn Hayes. Subject, official complaint and immediate action, pool area violations. "Dear residents, following a severe complaint filed by a homeowner, backed by video evidence of excessive noise, unsupervised minors, and resident harassment, the Sun Vista HOA board is taking immediate action. Effective immediately, the community pool is closed. It will remain locked pending a full board review and hearing, scheduled for this Tuesday at 7 p.m. All parties involved are required to attend." Sarah read it 3 times. Harassment. She was the one being harassed. She walked to her balcony. Her apartment, Unit 204, was on the cheap side of the building. It faced the parking lot, not the ocean view. But if she looked to her left, she could just see the pool area. It was 8 p.m. The pool lights were off. Gabe, the complex's overworked handyman, was looping a heavy-duty chain and a large industrial padlock through the handles of the gate. The blue water was dark and still, locked. Sarah felt a cold, suffocating dread. Evelyn hadn't just complained. She had stolen the one place her son felt free, and the fight, Sarah knew, had only just begun. The silence was worse than the noise. For 2 days, the Sun Vista complex existed in a state of suspended animation. The oppressive heat wave continued, but the pool, now chained shut, offered no relief. It sat there, a taunting, forbidden oasis. Usually the courtyard echoed with the sounds of life, splashing chatter, the barbecue sizzling. Now it was as quiet as a museum. Residents scurried from their cars to the lobby, avoiding eye contact. The message was clear: joy is a violation. Sarah felt like she was suffocating. Leo, unable to process the collective punishment, had devolved into a miserable, bouncing ball of energy inside their small apartment. "Why can't we go? Why? Did I yell too loud? Was it me?" he asked for the 20th time, his face pressed against the glass of their living room window, staring at the locked gate below. "No, baby, it wasn't you. It's a grown-up problem," Sarah said, rubbing her temples. A grown-up problem felt like the understatement of the century. It felt like a class war, and she was on the losing side, armed with a renter's agreement and a late-model sedan. She knew she couldn't go to the hearing alone. She needed allies. She spent Monday evening knocking on doors. The response was heartbreakingly predictable. "Oh, Sarah, that's just awful," said Mrs. Peterson in 308, one of the mothers who had been at the pool. "But, Evelyn, well, you know, and Mark Johnson is my husband's golf partner. I just can't get involved. I'm so sorry." She closed the door, her face a mask of genuine but useless sympathy. The family in 212, also renters, just shook their heads. "We're month to month, Sarah. We make one wave, we're out. We're trying to save for a house. We'll just go to the beach." Only Maria, an older woman in 105 who had lived in the building since it was built, offered any semblance of support. She was watering her immense collection of geraniums on her patio. "That Bruja," Maria muttered, not looking up from her flowers. "That witch. She's been trying to empty this building of life for 10 years. First, it was no pets over 15 pounds. Then no bicycles in the elevators. Now no children laughing." "What can I do, Maria? She's going to lie. She has that video." Maria finally straightened, her back cracking. She looked at Sarah with dark, tired eyes. They pushed out the last family in 408, the Wilsons, 2 boys. She complained about the smell of their cooking. She complained about them running in the hallways. She and Mark Johnson special assessed them for hallway carpet damage until they were broke. They moved out in the middle of the night. A cold spike of fear hit Sarah. This wasn't about a noise complaint. This was a targeted campaign. She's trying to get me evicted. She's trying to cleanse the building, Maria corrected. She wants silence. She wants residents who are as cold and empty as her penthouse. Be careful, Mija. That hearing isn't a hearing, it's a formality. Sarah went back to her apartment, her resolve hardening into a cold, brittle anger. This wasn't just an inconvenience anymore. This was her home. From her window, she could see the parking garage. Evelyn's spot, 412, was the most desirable one, right by the elevator. But she never used it. She preferred her private, reserved spot, an outdoor one, perched on the edge of the retaining wall that separated the upper parking lot from the pool area below. There it was, her car. A brand-new Audi A7, white, so polished it seemed to glow in the twilight. It was her true status symbol, more so than the penthouse. It was parked with arrogant precision, angled slightly so it was the first thing anyone saw when they pulled in. Sarah had seen Evelyn wipe bird droppings off it with a silk cloth she kept in her purse. She looked at the car, then at the pool below it. A 20-foot drop, separated by a row of concrete parking barriers and a chain-link fence. She loves that car more than any person, Sarah whispered to herself. Tuesday night, 7 p.m. The community room was cold, the air conditioning cranked to an uncomfortable degree. It was set up like a courtroom. Mark Johnson, a man with a soft body and a hard, smug face, sat at the head of the table. Evelyn sat to his right, looking like a pleased executioner. 3 other board members, all in Evelyn's age bracket and tax bracket, sat opposite. Sarah sat alone at the defendant's table. "We are here," Mark began, his voice booming with false authority, "to address the incident on Saturday, October 14. An official complaint was filed by Ms. Hayes, Evelyn." Evelyn stood. She didn't have notes. She didn't need them. "Thank you, Mark. As you all know, I have been a pillar of this community for a decade. I have given my time to the board. I have worked to improve our shared living experience. And on Saturday, I was met with aggression, vitriol, and a level of noise so profound it violated not only my peace, but my safety." Sarah gaped. "Safety?" I was sitting on a chair reading a book. "Address the board, Ms. Ryland," Mark snapped. Evelyn continued. "The children were feral, unsupervised, screaming for hours. When I politely asked the adult present, Ms. Ryland, to manage the situation, I was met with, 'Well, I have the video.'" She played it. On a large TV, the board watched the video from Evelyn's phone. It was exactly as Sarah remembered, only worse. Evelyn's cold narration made Sarah sound like a belligerent stranger. The angle made the kids look chaotic. It ended on Sarah's angry, flushed face. "As you can see," Evelyn said, switching it off, "I was threatened. I felt I had no choice but to retreat. This element is destroying our community. It's bringing down our property values." "They were playing Marco Polo," Sarah burst out, her voice shaking. "It was 2 in the afternoon. You came out and screamed at my son. You recorded us. You were the one harassing us." "Ms. Ryland, this is not a she said situation," Mark interjected smoothly. "We have the evidence, we have the bylaws, and we have a motion." Evelyn smiled. "I have discussed this with Mark. The liability is simply too high. The demographic this pool attracts is not conducive to a peaceful, high-value property. Therefore, I propose a solution, not a ban, just a simple rule change." Mark nodded, picking up a piece of paper. "The motion on the table, proposed by Ms. Hayes and seconded by myself, is as follows. Effective immediately, the Sun Vista Community Pool will be designated an adults-only amenity. Use is restricted to residents and guests aged 18 and older. This will," how did you put it, Evelyn, "mitigate the noise and liability issues permanently." The room spun. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. This was it. This was the checkmate. This wasn't a warning. It was an eviction of childhood. You can't do that," Sarah stammered. "We can and we are," Mark said. "All in favor." Evelyn's hand shot up. The other 3 board members, without a moment of hesitation, raised theirs. "Motion passes. 5-0, Mark said, banging a small, ridiculous gavel. "The pool will be reopened tomorrow with its new signage. Thank you all. This meeting is adjourned." Evelyn stood, smoothing her linen pants. She looked directly at Sarah, her eyes visible now without the sunglasses. They were cold, gray, and utterly triumphant. She didn't say a word. She just held Sarah's gaze, the smirk a punctuation mark on her victory. Sarah sat frozen. The board members filed out, chattering about dinner reservations. She was left alone in the sterile, cold room. She had lost. She had lost the pool, she had lost her community, and she had lost her fight. She walked out of the community room and into the thick, humid night air. She looked at the locked pool and then up at the retaining wall. She saw the white Audi A7 gleaming under the security light, the symbol of the woman who had just ripped the heart out of her son's summer. Sarah walked back to her apartment, her keys digging so hard into her palm that they drew blood. She didn't even feel it. All she felt was a profound, icy rage, a kind of hatred she had never known she was capable of. The system was rigged. The rules were a weapon, and she was completely, utterly powerless. Or was she? The thought frightened her as much as the rage did. The walk from the community room to apartment 204 was a blur of concrete and controlled fury. When Sarah opened her door, the scene that greeted her shattered the last of her composure. Leo was asleep on the couch, still in his swim trunks and a t-shirt. He had refused to change, convinced that if he was ready, his mom could somehow reverse the pool closure. In his hand, he was clutching his favorite pair of neon green goggles. He had waited up for her. He had waited for the good news and had fallen asleep hopping. Sarah knelt by the couch, her hand trembling as she gently brushed the hair off his damp forehead. This small, innocent boy who had just wanted to play Marco Polo had become the casualty in a war he couldn't understand, waged by a woman who saw his joy as an inconvenience. The rage she'd felt in the meeting, cold and systemic, morphed into something hot, primal, and deeply personal. It was the protective, burning anger of a mother who had just watched her child be needlessly hurt. "I'm so sorry, baby," she whispered, her voice cracking. She picked him up. He stirred, mumbling, "Did we win, Mommy?" Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, the tears finally coming, hot and bitter. "No, Leo, we didn't, the mean lady," she won. She carried him to his bed and tucked him in, pulling the goggles from his sleeping grip and placing them on his nightstand like a retired soldier's medal. She couldn't sleep, she couldn't sit. She paced the small apartment, the silence of the room a stark contrast to the storm brewing in her chest. The air in the apartment was thick, unmoving. She went to the window, opening it, desperate for a breeze. Instead, she got the night. The complex was tomb quiet. A low, oppressive blanket of clouds was moving in, blocking the moon and stars. It was a physical manifestation of her mood. Her eyes, as if pulled by a magnet, went to the pool, dark, chained. Then up to the parking lot above. There it was, the white Audi. It was parked, as always, with its nose facing out, perfectly centered in its spot. It was more than a car. It was a fortress. It was Evelyn's smug, white, six-figure trophy parked on a throne of crumbling concrete, looking down on the community she had just broken. Sarah stared at it, her breathing shallow. She imagined taking a baseball bat to its perfect, gleaming finish. She imagined pouring paint thinner on its hood. She imagined the satisfaction, the sheer, visceral release. A low rumble of thunder vibrated through the glass. The storm was here. As if the thunder had cracked something open in the sky, the rain began. It wasn't a drizzle, it was a deluge. A sheet of water slammed against the building, as sudden and violent as a thrown bucket. Wind howled through the breezeways. The night, which had been silent, was suddenly full of noise. And Sarah wasn't the only one awake. 3 floors below and on the other side of the complex, Gabe, the handyman, zipped up his heavy-duty yellow rain slicker. He hated storms. Storms meant the drains on the upper lot. The ones he had been telling the board were critically blocked for 6 months, would overflow. And when they overflowed, the water would cascade over the retaining wall and flood the pool equipment room. He had filed 5 separate maintenance reports. He'd attached photos of the mud and debris clogging the drains. He'd pointed out the erosion. Mark Johnson's official reply was always the same. Deferred, not a budget priority. Gabe grabbed his flashlight and his longest plumbing snake and headed out into the monsoon. He was a good man, and he did his job even when his bosses were, in his private opinion, rich, useless idiots. He was the one who'd had to chain the pool. He'd seen Sarah's face after the meeting. He'd seen Lee crying at the window earlier. His own nephew used to swim in that pool back before his sister moved to Arizona. He trudged up the stairs to the upper parking lot. The rain was coming down so hard it felt like handfuls of gravel. The parking lot was already a shallow lake. He could see the problem immediately. The main drain, located just 3 feet from the parking barrier in front of spot 412, was completely submerged, a swirling vortex of leaves, mud, and trash. "Damn it, Mark," he spat, the rain swallowing his words. He waded through the ankle-deep water and jammed the plumbing snake into the drain. He worked it, cursing, pulling up clumps of rotting leaves and plastic bags. The water was still rising. It had nowhere to go. And it was all flowing toward the retaining wall. In her apartment, Sarah was also watching the water. She saw the lake forming on the upper lot. She saw the flashlight beam, Gabe, she assumed, fighting his losing battle. Then a flash of lightning illuminated the entire scene in a stark, blue-white negative. In that 1 second, Sarah saw it. The concrete parking barrier behind Evelyn's Audi. The water wasn't just pooling around it, it was flowing under it. The ground, already critically saturated, was becoming a muddy slurry. The barrier, which Sarah had always assumed was a solid, immovable block of concrete, was visibly shifting under the hydrostatic pressure. The chain-link fence behind it was bowing. Another crack of thunder, this one so loud it shook the building. It sounded like an explosion. Gabe saw it too. He'd finally cleared the drain and the water was starting to recede, but the damage was done. He shone his flashlight on the base of the parking barrier for spot 412. The earth beneath it was gone, washed away. The only things holding the concrete block in place were 2 pieces of rusted rebar and the sheer, stubborn weight of the Audi A7 parked against it. Gabe looked at the car. He looked at the retaining wall. He looked down at the dark, empty, adults-only pool. He thought of Leo's goggles. He thought of the 5 maintenance reports. He thought of Mark Johnson's dismissive email. He could act. He could run to his truck, grab the emergency flares and caution tape. He could call 911. He could try to find some chocks to brace the tires, though it was probably too late. He could, at the very least, bang on Evelyn's door, wake her up, and tell her to move her precious car before it fell into her precious, silent pool. He stood there for a full 10 seconds, the rain plastering his hair to his face. His flashlight was fixed on the groaning rebar. He slowly lowered the beam. He picked up his plumbing snake, coiling it with deliberate care. He turned his back. He walked away. He had drains to check on the far side of the building. His job was to clear drains, and he had cleared the drain. This was a budget priority issue. In her apartment, Sarah held her breath. She watched Gabe's flashlight beam disappear around the corner. It was just her and the car and the storm. She saw the car's nose-heavy front end lurch forward, just an inch, but it was an inch it couldn't take back. A deep, groaning screech of metal on concrete, the rusted rebar snapping, the sound of earth giving way. The concrete barrier, weighing half a ton, toppled forward first, vanishing into the darkness. For a heart-stopping second, the Audi A7 teetered on the brink, its front wheels spinning uselessly in the air over the 20-foot drop. Its brake lights flashed, as if the car itself was panicking. Then gravity won. The car plunged, nose first, into the night. It didn't just fall, it crashed. A colossal, echoing smash-splash that seemed to shake the foundations of the building. It was the sound of 6 figures of German engineering meeting 8 feet of chlorinated water and a concrete floor. The lights in every apartment in the complex flickered on. People were shouting. Sarah stood at her window, her hand over her mouth, her heart hammering against her ribs. The parking spot was empty, a jagged, muddy wound in the asphalt. Down below, in the center of the dark, chained, adults-only pool, was a new, car-shaped shadow. Then a sound, muffled, surreal, blaring from beneath the water. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Evelyn's car alarm was going off. At the bottom of the kids' pool. The pre-dawn light was a sickly gray, polluted by the strobing red and blue of emergency vehicles. The Sun Vista complex, usually an island of manicured calm, looked like a disaster zone. A fire truck, 2 police cruisers, and a massive tow truck with a crane attachment were crammed into the courtyard. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a world that was dripping and humid, smelling of ozone, churned mud, and something new, gasoline. Evelyn Hayes was hysterical. She was standing on the pool deck in a silk bathrobe and slippers, her silver hair plastered to her head in wet, chaotic clumps. She was not sad. She was not grieving. She was incandescent with a rage that seemed to vibrate her entire body. "Someone did this?" she shrieked, her voice cracking, echoing off the concrete. It was her, the renter, the one with the bratty kid. She pushed in my car. She was pointing, a long, trembling finger, up at the balcony of Unit 204. Sarah stood there wrapped in an old college sweatshirt, holding a mug of coffee she hadn't touched. She was watching the scene with a calm, detached numbness. Leo was inside, thankfully asleep again, his door shut. "Ma'am, please calm down," said a tired-looking police officer. He had a notepad. It was already damp. "Calm down," Evelyn screeched. "My car, my brand-new Audi, it's in the pool, that woman. She threatened me. At the board meeting, she was furious. This is retaliation. This is vandalism. It's attempted. It's an attack." The officer sighed. It was 5:30 a.m. He wanted this to be an insurance report, not a criminal investigation. "You're saying she somehow pushed a 2-ton vehicle in a monsoon over a concrete barrier and through a fence?" "I don't know how," Evelyn sputtered. She sabotaged it. She's unhinged. Just look at her. She's enjoying this." Sarah didn't move. She just watched. The officer looked up at Sarah, then back at Evelyn. "We'll talk to her, ma'am. Please go inside. The tow crew needs a clear deck." "I'm not going anywhere. That's my property." The detective who had just arrived, a man named Diaz, motioned his partner over. "You handle the tow and the crane operator. Get statements from the truck crew. I'll handle this." He walked over to Evelyn. "Ma'am, I'm Detective Diaz. I'm going to be in charge of this investigation. I need you to walk me through what happened." "I told you what happened," Evelyn snapped. "She did it, that renter, Sarah Ryland. We had a dispute. She was angry that the board voted to make the pool adults only, so she destroyed my car." Diaz's eyebrows went up. "Adults only, a dispute over the pool, and now your car is in it." The irony was not lost on him. "Okay, let's start with your alibi. Where were you when you heard the crash?" "I was in my penthouse, asleep. The sound. It was like a bomb. I looked over my balcony and she pointed at the watery automotive grave. "That's when I saw her on her balcony watching." "So she was on her balcony after the crash," Diaz clarified, writing. "Got it, and you have. Any proof at all that she was involved? Any witnesses? Anything?" "My proof," Evelyn said, jabbing a finger toward the ruined parking spot, "is that it's impossible for this to be an accident. That barrier was solid concrete. The fence was. It was a fence. Someone had to force it." Diaz looked up at the gaping hole. He looked at the sheared-off earth, the muddy cascade that stained the pool wall. He looked at the tow truck operator, who was shaking his head as he surveyed the scene. "Right," Diaz said. "We'll be in touch." He left a fuming Evelyn and went to find the complex handyman, who was already on scene, talking to the fire captain. "You're the maintenance lead?" Diaz asked. "Gabe, yes, sir," Gabe said. He was in a fresh, dry uniform, but his eyes were red-rimmed. He hadn't slept. "You were on duty last night, during the storm?" "Yes, sir, clearing drains. That storm was a monster. The whole upper lot was flooded. I was fighting the main drain up there for a good 20 minutes. Diaz's head snapped up. "You were up there before this happened. Did you see the car? Did you see anyone near it?" Gabe took a slow, deliberate breath. This was it. "I saw the car, sir, hard to miss, and I saw the water. It was bad, real bad." "Did you see Ms. Ryland, the woman in 204? "No, sir, didn't see anyone. Just me, the rain, and a whole lot of mud. That drain. I've told the board about that drain for years." Diaz stopped writing. "What do you mean?" "I mean I filed 5 reports, 5, in the last year, told him the drainage was bad, that the erosion was compromising the wall, that the rebar in those old barriers was rusting out. You can see it, right there." He pointed his flashlight at the edge of the hole. "See that? That's rusted rebar, snapped right off. The concrete was rotten." "You have copies of these reports?" Diaz asked, his voice suddenly sharp. "Yes, sir, on my computer. Every one of them. And every one of them has a reply from the board president, Mr. Johnson." "And what was his reply?" "Deferred," Gabe said, his voice flat. "Not in the budget." Diaz was silent for a moment. "Thank you, Gabe. Don't go anywhere." Diaz's last interview was with Sarah. He met her at her apartment door. "Ms. Ryland, I'm Detective Diaz. I need to ask you a few questions." "I figured," Sarah said, stepping aside. "I'm sure you're aware," Diaz said, "that Ms. Hayes is accusing you of being responsible for this." "I heard her. The whole complex heard her," Sarah said, her voice devoid of emotion. "It's insane." "Where were you at approximately 2:19 a.m.? Right here, standing at that window, Sarah said, pointing. I couldn't sleep. I was upset about the board meeting. I was watching the storm. So you saw it happen? I saw it. I saw the water pooling. I saw Gabe up there trying to clear the drain. I saw him leave, and then I saw the car fall. You saw Gabe leave? Diaz's eyes narrowed. What did you see him do? He was working on the drain. He finished, picked up his tools, and walked around the building. Maybe a minute later, the car, it went. And you, Diaz asked, you didn't go outside, you didn't do anything. I was in my apartment, detective, the entire time. My son was asleep in the next room. I was furious about the pool. Yes, I hate what she did, but this, she shook her head. I wouldn't even know how. Her story was simple, it was believable, and it matched Gabe's, it matched the evidence. Diaz nodded. Thank you for your time. He went back downstairs. The sun was starting to rise. The crane was in position. Evelyn was now arguing with Mark Johnson, the HOA president, who had finally shown up, looking pale and disheveled. You're supposed to protect us, Mark, Evelyn was screaming. Our property, look at this, it's a war zone. Evelyn, the insurance will cover it. Mark began, but he looked terrified. All right, clear the deck, the crane operator yelled. The thick metal cables were lowered into the muddy water. There was a clank and a groan as the hooks found purchase on the car's chassis. The crane's engine roared, and the Audi A7 began its slow, pathetic ascent from the pool. It emerged like a drowned beast, mangled. The front end was completely smashed. The windshield was a spiderweb of cracks. Muddy water poured from its windows and grille. It was a total, unmitigated loss. As the car was lifted high, clearing the pool's edge, Diaz walked over to the ruined retaining wall. He shone his own flashlight into the chasm. Gabe was right. The concrete was rotten. The rebar was rusted to dust. The earth was a muddy soup. The parking barrier hadn't been pushed. It had been pulled out by the sheer weight of the water and earth giving way. He looked at the maintenance reports Gabe had just emailed him. 5 of them, all clear, all detailed, all deferred. He walked over to Evelyn, who was watching her car, her trophy, drip onto the pavement, her face a mask of disbelief. Ma'am, we're concluding our initial investigation, Diaz said, his voice official. Well, are you arresting her? Evelyn demanded. No, ma'am, Diaz said. He looked past her, his gaze landing on Mark Johnson, who was trying to slip away. This wasn't vandalism, this wasn't sabotage. He held up his phone, showing the subject line of the maintenance report emails. This, he said, was negligence. Evelyn's head snapped from the phone to the detective. What? Your car wasn't pushed, Ms. Hayes. It fell. It fell because this retaining wall is rotten, the drains were clogged, and the barriers were compromised. It was an accident waiting to happen. He then turned his full attention to Mark Johnson, who had frozen. And according to these reports, Diaz said, his voice dropping, the board and you specifically, Mr. Johnson, knew all about it, and you did nothing. Evelyn's face, which had been a mask of rage, slowly contorted into something new. A horrified, dawning comprehension. Her fury, a guided missile, was swiveling from Sarah to Mark. Mark Johnson's face went from pale to ashen. It wasn't just a car. It was the pool, the wall, the parking lot, the liability. It wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of gravity. And the bill had just come due. The reckoning was faster and more brutal than anyone could have imagined. The Sun Vista HOA, it turned out, was a house of cards built on deferred maintenance, and Evelyn's Audi was the first card to fall. The complex was a hive of activity, but not of the joyful kind. The pool was drained, revealing the full extent of the damage. The impact had shattered the concrete floor, cracked the sidewalls, and destroyed the filtration system. The retaining wall was a muddy cliff. The upper parking lot was cordoned off with ugly orange fencing. The first bomb to drop was the insurance. Mark Johnson, in a panic, had filed a massive claim. It was denied within 48 hours. The adjuster, a woman with zero patience for corporate malfeasance, took one look at Gabe's maintenance reports, compared them to the physical evidence, and issued a blistering denial. The policy, she pointed out in a savage email CC'd to the entire HOA, explicitly excluded damage resulting from willful neglect and failure to repair known structural deficiencies. This wasn't an act of God, this was a failure to act. The cost to repair the pool, the retaining wall, and the parking lot was estimated at just under $450,000. The second bomb was Evelyn's personal car insurance. They, too, denied her claim for the $90,000 Audi. Why? Because the vehicle was destroyed due to the negligence of a third party, the HOA. Her only recourse, they politely informed her, was to sue her own homeowners association. Evelyn Hayes, the woman who had sacrificed her community for her property value, had, in a single night, lost her primary asset and found herself financially ruined by the very board she controlled. An emergency all-hands meeting was called. It wasn't in the cold community room. It was held outside on the scorched grass of the courtyard next to the concrete tomb of the drained pool. This time everyone came. The silent majority was silent no longer. The denial of insurance email had been forwarded to every resident. The parents, the renters, the quiet owners, they were all there, and they were furious. Mark Johnson, flanked by a shell-shocked Evelyn, stood at a trembling lectern. As you are all aware, he stammered, we have experienced a significant structural setback. You mean your deferred maintenance destroyed the pool? Yelled Mr. Peterson from 308, his face purple. His golf partner loyalty had evaporated. You told us we didn't have the budget for repairs, but we have the receipts, Mark. We have the receipts for the $30,000 in landscape upgrades around your and Evelyn's patios. A woman from the 5th floor held up a piece of paper. And the new lobby furniture, the $15,000 Italian sofas, while the rebar was rusting. The crowd turned on them. It was a feeding frenzy. My unit has water damage from the overflow. You ignored my calls. You assessed me for my goddamn welcome mat. This is fraud, Mark. It's criminal. Evelyn, desperate, tried to deflect, to land one last blow. This all started because of her, she shrieked, pointing at Sarah, who was standing at the back of the crowd, holding Leo's hand. If her noisy, uncontrolled children hadn't forced the issue. It was the worst thing she could have said. Maria, the older woman from 105, stepped forward, her voice quiet but carrying more authority than Mark Johnson had ever possessed. No, Bruja, Maria said, her voice cutting through the noise. This started when you decided that your silence was more important than our children. This started when you and Mark decided your patios were more important than our safety. She looked around the crowd. You didn't just let the wall rot, you let this community rot, and now the rot has broken through. The crowd surged, recall the board. Mark tried to bang his pathetic gavel. This is not a formal recall meeting. It is now, Mr. Peterson bellowed. I motion for an immediate vote of no confidence and a recall of the entire board. Seconded, screamed half the courtyard. It was a landslide, a brutal, unanimous public execution. Mark Johnson and the other 3 board members were removed. Evelyn, who wasn't technically on the board but was its shadow ruler, was left standing alone, unprotected. Sarah watched, her face calm. She hadn't said a word. She didn't have to. The community she had tried to rally, the one that had been too scared to help her, had finally found its voice. It just needed a $450,000 reason. A new interim board was elected on the spot. Maria was the new president. Her first motion, to levy an emergency assessment on all unit owners to cover the repairs, and to file a civil suit against Mark Johnson and Evelyn Hayes for gross negligence and misappropriation of funds. The motion passed to wild applause. Evelyn's face crumpled. She was not only broke, she was about to be sued by her own neighbors. Maria's second motion, to immediately and permanently rescind the adults-only rule for the pool, effective the day it reopens. A cheer went up. Leo, who hadn't understood the financial talk, understood that. He squeezed his mom's hand. We won, Mommy, we won. Sarah looked at the ruined pool, at the broken wall, at the defeated, sobbing figure of Evelyn Hayes being led away by her husband. She looked at Maria, who caught her eye and gave her a slow, satisfied nod. Yeah, baby, Sarah whispered, pulling him into a hug. We won. It took 3 long, expensive months. The complex was a construction site. The emergency assessment was painful, but people paid it with a strange sense of purpose. Gabe was promoted to property manager, given a 40% raise, and put in charge of the entire repair, which he supervised with meticulous, loving detail. Evelyn Hayes and Mark Johnson both put their units up for sale within the week. They sold at a massive loss, the pending litigation and structural assessment scaring off most buyers. They were gone by the 1st of the month. Then one Saturday in late spring, it was finished. The retaining wall was a fortress of new rebar and high-strength concrete. The upper parking lot was pristine. The new, reinforced parking barriers were bolted deep into the bedrock. And the pool was beautiful. Repainted a vibrant azure with new tile and a new, quiet filter system. An email went out from Maria. The pool is open. 10 a.m. Please be as loud as you want. The complex gathered. This time it wasn't a lynch mob, it was a party. The grills were lit. Music was playing, and the pool was, once again, a joyous chaos of screaming, splashing kids. Sarah was on a new lounge chair, watching Leo and his friends in a furious game of Marco Polo. It was louder than it had ever been. Maria sat down next to her, handing her a plastic cup of lemonade. "Amazing, isn't it?" Maria said, adjusting her sunglasses. "How quickly things can change." Sarah looked up at the sparkling new retaining wall. She saw the new, empty parking spot, 412. It had been reassigned as guest parking. "It's not fair," Sarah said quietly, echoing the words her son had used weeks ago, the ones that had broken her heart. Maria looked at her, confused. "What do you mean, Mija? It's perfect, it's justice." Sarah smiled, a real relaxed smile that reached her eyes. "No, I know, it's just balanced." She turned her face up to the sun, closed her eyes, and for the first time in a very long time, she listened to the sound of her son's laughter and felt nothing but peace.